Good morning, members, and special welcome to the new councillors to this first meeting of the Social Work Committee of this term. For your information, the meeting has been live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the council website for public listening. I'm reminding members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting your microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should either show your hand in the chambers, or if attending remotely, write speak in the Teams chat function, and you will invite to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we can deal with the business as efficiently as possible. As per my normal chair principles, I will focus on first-time speakers to ensure everyone gets an equal chance to participate. So if any member has to leave the room or leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join. This will allow us to monitor member presence. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. With that, having said that, I will move on to item number 1, the Sediment Apologies and Chair's approval of remote participation. Claire?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm aware of 3 apologies this morning from councillors Karen Crothers, David Slater and Gail McGregor. One councillor currently not present, being Councillor Wood. And for the benefit of those in the hall, we've currently got 7 members present on Teams, being Councillor Flynn, Vice Chair, Councillor Bell, Councillor Davis, Drysdale, Hill, Whitelaw and Wilson.
Thanks very much, Claire. And just to confirm, I give my approval for remote participation. It's a done deal now, so can I move on to item 2, any declarations of interest?
Sorry, Chair, before that, could I come in? I had written speak in the chat.
Yes, come in, Pauline.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Morning, Lillian. It was just to say Andrew's having his tyre fixed, so he ought to be here soon with any luck. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's noted, Pauline. Thank you very much for that. So back to declarations of interest. Not seeing any, so none noted. We'll move on to item 3, the minute of the previous meeting of the 24th of March, excuse me, 2022. For noting, those of us who were in the last committee, I think both myself and the Vice Chair were there, so I'm happy to move that we just note and take it forward from there. Are we happy with that? Agreed?
Happy, second, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ian. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 4, delegation to Social Work Services Committee. And we've got...
Nick hasn't arrived, so I'm not sure clearly.
No, it's just been sorry, Chair, it's just myself if there's any questions, but it's obviously what was agreed at full council for this game. Okay, so this is the delegation as it's set out in 4, so our governance officer will ask any technical questions we have. Are we happy to note the remit of the Social Work Service Committee as detailed at 3.2?
Happy to note.
Okay, thank you. We're breaking all records here. Item number 5, Social Work Services Committee appointments to outside bodies. Lillian, can you come in on this just a minute, please, because there's a couple of things we need clarified first in agreement, and then we can move through this item.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to do so. Morning, members. I'd just like to kind of give an overview on both the previous process in which the Social Work Committee was represented on the outside bodies, and just to give you an update on a number of developments during the period of COVID and the subsequent new administration. So in the past, the agreement was that the chair or vice chair of the Social Work Committee would be the Public Protection representative on the Public Protection Committee. In terms of 2.2, the Alcohol and Drugs Support South West Scotland, that is actually a commission service and the delegated authority for the oversight of and the governance of that sits with the Health and Social Care Partnership. So I'm going to give a bit more information on that, around that as I move forward. The Alcohol and Drug Partnership, the requirement for one member, and this is a statutory requirement, again in the past has been delegated to the Chair of Social Work. The Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust is also a commission service, and that sits under the Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Planning Commissioning Team. And again, it's a commission service, and there is potential there for some conflict of interest. However, I will go over that again as we move through this. In terms of 2.5, there is also a challenge around the representation on Dumfries and Stewartry Women's Aid Board, because we do not make representation of an elected member on the Wigtonshire Women's Aid Board, and that has been an area of contention in a previous period of administration, so that's a consideration for members. 2.6, the Older People's Consultative Group. Again, this is a health and social care partnership responsibility in terms of governance, and it hasn't met now in almost 3 years. And at this moment in time, it's unclear from the partnership as to whether that will recommence as a consultative group. The Dumfries and Galloway Champions Board at 2.7 is much more straightforward. That again is a requirement for 4 elected members from each locality attend. So I've had a conversation with Chair and Vice Chair, and one of my proposals for committee to move forward for members' consideration would be for me to seek further clarity from the Health and Social Care Partnership on those areas that are delegated to the partnership on 2 fronts. One, to give members an update on the ongoing participation in those particular aspects, and also as to whether that does constitute a conflict of interest, given that they are in the main commissioned, and consequently it is a different governance structure. So that would be a proposal for members through the Chair to consider, and I'm happy to take any questions and provide any clarity. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lillian. Just one bit of clarity. Can you just clear up the issue about the women's aid groups, because I believe Wigtonshire kind of operates separately, and is the plan to look at them overall and see if we can bring them into line with each other? Is that your proposal?
Both women's aid operates differently. One is affiliated to the national agenda and one is not. So we have never had a request for an elected member to be representing the Social Work Committee or indeed full council on the Wigtonshire Women's Aid. Thank you.
Yeah, because I believe that appointment, Willie, before you come in, I can see itching to get in here. That's actually a Wigtonshire Area Committee request and filling that post. So that's my understanding. Do you agree with that, Willie?
Yeah, Chair, we have filled that post in the Wigtonshire Women's Aid, and it's been a long standing in terms of the Wigton Area Committee.
Yeah, I think we know that. I think that's a fair comment, Willie. I think what we're trying to get to here is we should really have some sort of parity across the region, whether it's the area committees that do it, whether the social work committee does it or whatever, and that's what Lillian's got to go away and find out and bring back some suggestions for us, or proposals, maybe a better way of putting it. Tracy?
I'm not sure whether this is the right time to come in with this, but in 2.4, the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust, I was on that last term, and they don't actually have a board. So there isn't any meetings, there isn't anything to actually sit on. I went to see, this is one particular lady who does everything. I went and seen her, and I've visited her, and it's excellent work that they're doing. I mean, it's really essential work that they're doing, but there isn't actually a board to sit on.
Aye, please, Lillian.
Thanks, Councillor Little. I think that's one of the challenges, because it is a commissioned service, and consequently the woman that you refer to provides the assurance of the delivery of the commissioned services. So that is one of the areas that I think we absolutely have to have clarity as to how that will move forward. My view is that it would be a conflict of interest to have a representation on a commissioned service. Thank you.
Okay, so Have we got Andy? Sorry, Pauline, on you come.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to ask, so Lillian, am I right in saying you're going to come back to us with the Women's Aid potential for another vote on the position for the Wigtonshire seat? Is that correct? Thanks.
Not the Wigtonshire seat, the one that's in the papers here. The Wigtonshire one is currently operating under a separate process. So it's the ones where they've asked the Social Work Committee to send a representative to, which is the Dumfries and Stewartry one. But you're right, that's exactly the report that Lillian's agreed to bring back what, next committee?
Yes.
For the next committee, okay. Willie?
Could we just get legal clarification on that in terms of should we as members sit on a commission service, whether as a board or a trust? We need the legal definition rather than Lillian proposing anything. And that's not taken away from what Lillian has said. It's just what the legal definition in terms of the code of conduct.
Funny enough, that's exactly the conversation Lily and I had the other day when we talked about this. So the report Lillian brings back, we'll have all that kind of assurance for members. Am I right?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
I think I've just committed you to something.
No,
there.
absolutely.
Okay, then. So are we comfortable then to move forward with the 3 remaining appointments that we're going to look at today if we park these other ones until next committee when we get some more information and clarification? We comfortable to go forward in that? Right. Agreed, thank you. Okay then, so we'll go to the first one, and that was to appoint one elected member and 1 sub to the Public Protection Committee. Actually want to nominate Ian Howie, the Vice Chair, and myself as sub, because that's kind of the arrangement it's always been. It's a strategic committee. Are we comfortable with that? Right, thanks. Then we've got to appoint 1 elected member and 1 sub to the Dumfries and Galloway Alcohol and Drug Partnership. And again, nominate myself for that, with Linda Durward as my sub. Are we comfortable with that? Thank you. So that moves us on to the last bit, 4 elected members, 1 from each locality, to the Dumfries and Galloway Champions Board looked after children and care leavers, as detailed in paragraph 4.7. I've got 1 vote necessary because I went around all 4 political groupings in the council and asked for nominations. The A&E nominations, Councillor McGregor was nominated and Councillor Wilson has been nominated. So we've got a vote in that first one. Claire, how do we do the vote for this? Is it show of hands or is it private?
Okay, no, the vote would be by roll call, Chair.
Okay, roll call, yeah, no problem. So we'll do them each of the 4 districts at a time. So are we ready to move to the vote? It's either Councillor McGregor or Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Chair, as standard practice with vote, could I have a proposer and seconder for each one?
Yeah, okay, so of course, so you do. Is there who can come in to nominate and second Councillor McGregor? Pauline? I see you speak.
I would like...
Yeah, you're happy to do it, yeah?
Thanks. Yes, Chair, I would nominate
thank you.
Councillor McGregor. Thank you.
Maureen, are you going to second it? And Maureen will second it. And Councillor Wilson. Paula?
Propose Councillor Wilson.
Okay, Paula, and second?
Second.
Okay, Councillor Durward. Okay. So are we using names or are we using motion or amendment? Just use names, will we? Be easier?
Right then, Chair. It certainly made my life easier, same motion and amendment for ticking my boxes. But anyway, so the motion is proposed by Councillor Drysdale, seconded by Councillor Johnston, to nominate Councillor McGregor as the Annandale and Eskdale County Rep on the D&G Champions Board. The amendment is proposed by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Councillor Dorward. That would be Councillor Wilson. So going to the vote then, Chair.
Amendment.
Vice Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Bell.
Motion.
Councillor Davis.
Motion.
Councillor Dorward.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Hill.
Motion.
Councillor Jameson.
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston.
Motion.
Councillor Little.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Amendment.
Councillor Mayo.
Amendment.
Councillor Scobie. Councillor Stevenson.
Amendment.
Councillor Whitelaw.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wood. Just checking.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Amendment.
Okay, amendment carried, 12 votes to 6. That's Councillor Wilson. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll move on to Nisdale now. I've got one nomination so far, and that's for Councillor Tracy Little. Just for fairness, is there anybody else at this late time want to come forward? Are we happy just to appoint Tracy? Okay, I'm not seeing anything coming in, so congratulations, Tracy. For the stewardship, I've got one nomination, and that's for Councillor Drysdale. Is there anybody else showing an interest, or are we happy to appoint Pauline?
Happy to appoint.
Okay, that's fine. Congratulations, Pauline. And in Wigtonshire, I've got one nomination again, that's Councillor Hill. Is there anybody else from Wigtonshire area who would be interested in that? Or are we happy to appoint Chrissy? Okay, I'm not seeing any opposition, Chrissy, so congratulations. You're elected as well, or appointed, I think, is the proper way, I think, of doing it. So with that, thanks very much for everybody. We'll move on to item number 6. The Transformation Programme, Early and Effective Intervention Family Support. We're asked to note the progress and achievements of the Family Support Service over the past 3 months. I've got Stephen. Hi, Stephen. We'll do the updated report, giving members the overview of the progress to date that's required. We normally do this twice a year. I think this is actually, if ever you could say it was a good news story about bad news, this is one of those occasions. Let's see what Stephen has to say, and then we can make some comment after that. Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. And it's great to be here in the Chamber today, and particularly great to see the new members as well, so thanks for that. This service has been absolutely critical to the way Children and Family Social Work has met its statutory requirements over the pandemic. And it's really quite exciting because research shows us that if we intervene as early as possible in people's lives and we intervene effectively, that we improve people's outcomes. We were fortunate enough to be granted some time-limited funding to develop an early intervention approach, and we've used 2 different strands to do that. One is to develop a family support team, which we've done as part of my service, and over the period of the last 18 months, we've supported 129 families, and that's 226 children. Approximately 50% of those are for cases that we already hold, which wasn't our initial intention. And the other 50% is for early intervention, and I'm seeing hands coming up, if it's okay if I continue. The other element of this is to work with the third sector, and we've driven our relationships really strongly, and we've managed to bring in a lot of external funding to the area to look at community-based family intervention as well. As part of this, we've managed to see a significant reduction in the number of looked after children in the region, and also a significant reduction in the number of children on the Child Protection Register. That's not because there's less children who need support, but we're working in a different way. We're going into people's houses at different times of the day, 7 days a week, putting tangible family support in there. This makes a real difference. We are actually working with more families because the pandemic's had such a significant impact. And like I've already alluded to, the statutory element of our service would have struggled without this. We are currently looking at what the long-term future of the services look like, and we do have some opportunity through government policy changes and a whole family wellbeing fund that's been recently announced. However, there's been a delay in the specifics around that. This has really helped us transform our own care system locally, and it aligns to the national system around the promise. That's a lengthy-ish introduction. I'm happy to take any comments or questions in the paper.
Thanks, Stephen. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I'll preface my remarks in thanking Stephen for his candid report, worrying as it is, especially when you turn to 3.10 and you read that we've continued to receive many referrals from the local locality social team, and it goes on to say, demand currently outweighs our capacity and are currently working to mitigate the risks of our children and families. And it's in that backdrop, you know, that we're going to see continual increase, and more so with the cost of living crisis that's going to be, which is already upon us in terms of inflation. But I want to look at the, and I heard on the radio or I read somewhere about the early intervention, and it's around the 3.7 in care, and children cannot stay with the adults and their families, they will stay with their brothers and sisters or aunties, uncles, grannies, grandpas or whatever. And it goes on in that if children are living with their families and are safe and feel loved, they should stay there. And it's really that early intervention, and Stephen and I have had many discussions over the piece on this. And I think there is, or we should be trying to get in there as early as possible, where social work knocks on a family door and say, would you take the wean phase because we feel the wean is at risk. And it's the payment of that. And I know it's not just about payment, but when you do get a child as a kinship carer, then it does have cost implications. And I would like to be assured that we are looking at that and that we are doing that early intervention and making payment as soon as possible, as soon as, indeed, that we pass that child over because we're doing it with some authority. We think that is the right place for that child to be, rather than then go through a whole process. No, we've got to then start to assess, which could take anything from 8 to 20 weeks or whatever. And that family is left sometimes, you know, pretty hardship comes in. So it's just that assurance on this report, rather than just note, you know, members are asked to note the progress. I think we need to be looking for a greater amount of financial resources for social work, knowing what we do in this report, that the cases are increasing.
Thanks, Willie. Stephen, do you get a comment on that?
Councillor Scobie, thank you for the comments and the question, and we certainly have had many conversations around such cases. I'll answer your final point first. If we identify that a kinship placement is required, we make a payment immediately, regardless of whether or not the assessment's been done. And that was following an ombudsman decision 4 or 5 years ago now. And in many local authorities, the assessment time can take longer than it should because of resource issues. We said we will not have anybody disadvantaged when we've made that decision with them, and we would pay immediately. So in relation to that, we do that as a matter of course. And I can also assure members in the room that we get almost all of our assessments done on time. I thought I just better put that in there as well, especially since Lillian sitting at the top table. In relation to the keeping children at home and whatever their home happens to be, you're absolutely right. And When we speak about early intervention, that's not just about intervening in people's lives at as young an age as possible, but it's as soon as we, as a council, are aware that there's an issue. And what we've done in addition to this, but alongside this, these support services, is we've changed the way we do our social work. And apologies for members who have heard me say this before, but for the new members, I think it's really important. We really ask our social workers and all of our social work staff to spend time with people and build relationships with them, identify their own strengths as individual human beings, identify strengths of family units, wider family, neighbourhood supports, etc. So we look at a strength-based approach, and that's paid massive dividends. But that takes time, you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that our staff have the time to do that. So as a whole package, we've seen quite, like I said, just statistically speaking, significant moves forward in terms of reduction in numbers of looked after children, reduction of numbers of children on the Child Protection Register. However, we are working with more people for all of the reasons you've suggested, Councillor Scobie. I hope that answers the points that you raised.
And this, Chair, and I'm reassured, you know, I'm surprised the 45 years for the Ombudsman. I didn't realise that, so I'm quite happy with that and pleased with what you're saying. It takes away this whole perception that working class people, families here, that social work are only there to take the wains off me. And it's to try and break down that you're there to support and help families to maintain the family unit.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Willie. Andy Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Stephen, for that. It is a very good report, and it is warts and all. It does raise for me a couple of issues in relation to perhaps use of language or resourcing, and it may well be both. On the first page, it says enabling us to work towards cost avoidance, and I'm not really sure, as I've read that a number of times, I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means, and perhaps you can enlighten me. But like Councillor Scobie, I had some issues around 310 and the fact that some of the language in there, this is a public document, it would suggest to the public, I would say, that, you know, we've got a finite capacity to deal with this, which means that when we get to a certain level, if you're not in, you're out. And that to me suggests that perhaps we need to be looking at resourcing and how we do it. You know, it was use of the demand currently outweighs capacity, I got that. But then we're talking about the right referrals as opposed to appropriate referrals, perhaps. And then, you know, we need to limit the workloads of our teams. Well, we need to manage the workloads of our teams rather than limit them, perhaps, because that suggests that, as I say, there is a finite capacity, and that if you're not already in, then you're out, and there will be people who fall by the wayside. And if that was the case, then clearly we'd be feeling in our duty to manage, and there's protection issues and welfare issues, and obviously the development of young people. So I'd appreciate your comments on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Some interesting points about language, and I must actually apologise for this because I'm constantly speaking to my social workers about taking jargon out of reports for children and families so they can understand what they mean. So fair point. In relation to cost avoidance, that's a deliberate term that we've used and a term that we've discussed with colleagues in finance, because the funding that was allocated to this approach was from a transformation pot of money to try and transform services so they can be more efficient and potentially save money. What we were quite clear about in this environment, though, is that because of the statistics and the research that show we're getting increasing numbers of children, more complex family dynamics, we're likely to have more children and families requiring our resource, even though there are going to be less children as we move forward demographically. So it was about intervening earlier, which is more cost effective, and avoiding really expensive costs at the end. So that's why that's there. So happy to have given that clarity. I think your next points are critical, really, and I'm not going to be making any sort of plea here around resource, because it's not what this is about, but we do have finite resources, and it's not quite as straightforward as if you're in, you're in, and if you're out, you're out. And you mentioned about managing workloads. We do that all of the time, and quite often we have to look at who is the most vulnerable child or the most vulnerable family, and we have to give the resource to them in terms of reducing the risk of abuse that is our ultimate priority, for example. And we will always prioritise cases where we know that's happening. And sometimes that means other people might not get the support they need as immediately as we would like to give it. What this service and this approach involving the third sector has done is it's allowed us to do much more of that earlier and effective intervention. But This service does currently have a waiting list of 8 families. That's developed since, as this report was being written in since, and that's 11 children. Now, they are not children who require a statutory service from the local authority, but they are children who require support. So we are looking at how we can upscale this. We are looking at particularly the future funding coming from the government around the whole family wellbeing fund. You will undoubtedly hear much more about that once the government have formally announced that, and we bring a paper back here to say what that looks like and what it will mean. But we are looking at how we increase the capacity. What's really interesting about the referrals coming from youth justice and our locality teams, as an example, is that the approach is seen to be working and really, really effective. So we need to actually have our statutory response much more focused on that effective intervention, as opposed to always servicing the bureaucratic systems that are around. We will always service those, don't get me wrong, but we need to shift like that we need to manage that's work directly with families against what is the bureaucracy in the background. So hopefully that's answered the points, and if not, happy to come back.
No, thank you. And if I've interpreted what you said properly, what you're saying about the cost avoidance is really about early intervention to prevent later costs. Okay. No, thank you very much.
I think Lillian wants to add to that. Andy, sorry.
Thanks, Councillor McFarlane. I just want to give you assurance that we will always ensure that any child that's at risk, that we will have resources to intervene. Stephen's absolutely correct that we've had a huge demand, and we've had a huge increase in demand for services in social work, particularly around the pandemic. And we've had to change a lot of the way in which we deliver services, but undoubtedly I will be coming back at various points to social work to have conversations around the resources required moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm assuming I'll catch up in a minute, Linda. There's a couple in front of you. So just for the newbies, you know, your professional appraisal and judgment kicks in, it's essential. And then if you were so short a resource, you would bring a report back here to then go to FPT. Am I right? Yep. Just so that make new members aware. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hold the responsibility and the risk for the local authority. So at any point, if I felt that we weren't able to meet that statutory duty and make sure that children were safe, I would bring an urgent item back. I do have the authority to overspend when it comes to risk, and clearly from good governance, we would always consider the weighing up of the risk against the budget. But I'm very clear, and I've always said to elected members, financial issues won't come into it if it's safeguarding children. Thank you.
Okay, I have a number of speakers waiting to come in. I've got John Young, George Jimison, and then Linda Dorward in that order. So, John first.
Thank you, Chair. And Stephen, thank you for this very informative report. I want to touch on one of the most positive aspects of the report, 3.15. For initial funding of £34,000, you've attracted almost £500,000 worth of additional funding from the third sector. I wonder if you could expand on that and perhaps indicate some of the third sector.
Our partnership working has really improved across the whole range of different third sector organisations, and through this approach and through other monies which have come in from Scottish Government on a short-term basis, we've managed to upscale a number of different third sector providers across the whole of the region. Aberlour, Children's Fest, and but two of the larger ones, Mossburn Community Farm as a smaller example. So we've managed to look at things across the piece, but the significant funds that have come in relation to that specific £35,000 was our partnership with Aberlour. We actually formed a strong collaborative, and we received funding from CORA to do so, and that has been really, really good. And we've had additional funding. In addition to what we've got in this paper, we're very, very close to another bid. When I say we, in partnership, it's predominantly Aberlour. We're very close to having a bid agreed, which will bring a similar sum in over the next 5 years, which is really, really exciting. I don't want to say too much more about that because it's not finalised, and you know, I'm slightly superstitious at times. So that's been really successful. And we have looked at upscaling a lot of community support through the third sector. I don't have the whole list in my mind, but I could definitely get that back and do a little briefing or an email to members to say exactly what we've done and how that's impacted, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, John. George?
Yeah, firstly, I think this is a hugely important initiative, and it's great that we're putting this effort into it. My interest is the collaboration with education and health. As an example, quite a lot of the ramifications of family problems actually are seen first at a school or in a nursery. What I'm wondering is what training the teachers get and how close you work with teachers, because I know from experience that kids can turn up hungry, ill-shod, poor clothes, dirty even, and it often falls on the initiative of teachers to take initiative, you know, going to swimming without swimming trunks, things like that. Is there a two-way flow of information and support to teachers? Because a teacher didn't sign up to be a social worker, but often they find that as part of their role, which I think is really important.
Thank you. I'm just coming in and forgetting to go through the chair. I do apologise, Chair. Yeah, I think that's what you've described is absolutely critical. And there's more than a two-way flow. So hungry children, for example, our school service, our education service are given specific funding to give free school meals, for example. We've got excellent examples across the region of breakfast clubs, and some of those are ad hoc, some of those are very deliberate, and colleagues in education would probably crucify me for saying ad hoc. It's very planned, but you know, it's not across the piece in terms of breakfast clubs. We actually trained hundreds, I forget the exact figure, but it was like the high hundreds of school staff, health staff, children's reporters, administration staff, children's hearing staff in our relationship and strength-based approach under the Signs of Safety umbrella about 3 years ago, which coincided with this, which was really about looking at people's strengths, people's vulnerabilities, and how we enhance those. So that flow is quite critical. I think what's fair to say, though, is getting it right for every child, which is the single policy for all children in Scotland, and how the government and local authorities support children. There is a gap between what universal services can provide and what statutory social work services can provide. And what this service and our approach tries to do is narrow that gap. And we have got better at identifying specific staff in schools. So we have looked after children champions, for example, who can communicate directly with social work teams. And we're working with our colleagues in education right now to see how we can enhance that. So we've got people who can actually seek the type of support as opposed to always coming through social work. So that's about, and Councillor, you mentioned earlier about the right type of referral. And it's just about understanding what people need. So that work goes on all of the time. We've got formal relationships with colleagues in health. There's a looked after health team that specifically provides support to looked after children. So absolutely all of those different synergies are there. They're not perfect. I've never worked in an environment where those synergies are perfect, but we work on them every single day to improve them. So I hope that responds and answers the questions.
Yeah, it absolutely does, but I'd just like to stress that connection, if you can review that connection just to make sure it is working. I know you've got a lot to do, but I think it is crucial with my education hat on that teachers are supported and teachers are encouraged to share information with you, because it often is the first signal that a kid's being neglected through whatever reason, but the child is suffering, not being able to go swimming because they haven't got any swimming trunks, and the school will find a pair of swimming trunks. So I know that's fine detail, but I think it's really important that teachers understand the process as well as the social workers.
Okay, thanks. I've got Linda and then Paula, and then Willie, because he's a second-time speaker. So Linda first, then Paula, and then Willie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Stephen. That's really heartening to see such a good news story. It's unfortunate we've got to deal with this issue, but it's really heartening to see it and hear it. And for me, it's about, you said that it's about a different way of working. It's about being proactive to prevent things happening, getting worse. And it's working in collaboration with third sector partners to provide a more flexible service, which is really, really good. Wee flag for me was, you mentioned in part of 3.1 was time-limited funding for this. Now, I take it that's to 2023, if I'm reading the report right. Sorry to, it's like stats and things. And you mentioned the whole family. Thank you. When is that the follow-on from this? And
I'm very enthusiastic about this topic. No, it's not the follow-on on. The funding that we currently have is your money, our money. It's Dumfries and Galloway Council's money. And that was as part of that transformation I mentioned a wee while ago. The whole Family Wellbeing Fund, now I'll try and be brief because I could give you a seminar for a whole day on this and the promise, and I will give you a seminar for a whole day in the near future, if allowed. The whole Family Wellbeing Fund is £500 million over the lifetime of the current Scottish Parliament to change the care system. And in this coming year, 50 million, 32 million that come into local authorities, is about looking at whole family support. Now, many local authorities in Scotland are just thinking about how they might do that. I'm really, really frustrated right now that we can't upscale what we're doing because we know how we need to spend the money. We've had a pilot, if I call it that, in place that's given us good evidence. So it's a separate pot. Now, what will happen with that is, I was at the meeting just yesterday and a Scottish Government representative was there, said, we will have that money to you before the summer. And I thought we were in the summer. They said potentially by the end of June, but there's some finer details to be sorted out. Now, once that hits, we have a proposal to take to our Children's Services Planning Group, because Children's Services Planning Groups have been given the authority to distribute that money in relation to what their children's needs would be. So we've got that. What I can say, and Lillian might come in because she's a member of the executive of that group, is that there's strong support for this approach. That's been reaffirmed, and we're just ready to go with that. Now, what's interesting about the way that fund's been set up is that it won't support things that are already funded. And I asked a specific question of the Scottish Government yesterday in relation to, we've got short-term specific funding that ends, and they said, what we mean by what's already funded is the things that have been in existence for 10 or 15 years that are, and I hate to use this word, but I'll quote, mundane, and they're not mundane at all, but that was what was said back to me. So my argument, or my discussion, will be to the executive group is that we should fund this. But what I will probably do is look at that 50% where it's from the statutory element and look at how we can upscale this approach for the most vulnerable. And then when this funding ends, we use the future funding, because it will recur, to make this permanent. And that's what I will put to the, and not wanting to preempt what will happen there. Probably said more than I normally would in relation to some of the things that are going on in the background. But the question was opened up and I utilised the opportunity. Thank you.
Can I come back to that?
Yeah, come back, Paul. Linda, sorry, yeah.
Linda, it's okay. That's really useful to know. I think the stop-start nature of some things that happens across the public sector, as I'm aware of from current and previous roles, is unfortunate. And this is an absolutely fantastic initiative that seems to be working really, really well. So it's great to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks for the positivity, Linda, and you're absolutely right. Paula, do you want to come in first?
Yep, thank you. Yeah, it's a great report, and it's good to see something in action that actually helps before it becomes a bigger problem. As you say, that ends up taking up a lot more funding than what it could do at the prior stage. Just to come back on something Councillor Jimison said, you said that the teachers and other education professionals were trained 3 years ago. Is there any update on that, or will that be a continual thing? Just 3 years is a long time, do you know, in people management. And the other thing is, any seminars you've had, I would greatly appreciate. I don't know about other new members, but do you know, it's always interesting to find out some of the back history of things.
Stephen, can you just give me a minute, Stephen? Is there any way you can turn up the volume in the room, because some members are struggling to hear? Right, so can you just remember that, because it makes it so much easier, and also for people online and also for the recording, if you can speak as close to the mic without making a funny noise, yeah, and maybe speak up a wee bit, and don't want you to shout, but just a wee bit, that'll be fine. Paula, is that you finished? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, Willie.
Yeah, Chair, I think the debate has been very interesting, and it's I want to describe it as a good report. It's a quite frightening report in terms of its content, and Stephen's been a breath of fresh air in what he's provided in terms of his responses. And it's really looking at that third and independent sector and how we managed through the COVID and how they contributed. I can refer to in Stranraer to the Home Start to the family centre at Park School, and there's others, so the Fed Up Cafe and so forth. And it's how do we utilise those where we can still deal with our statutory responsibilities, and to some, as Andy said, there was you're either in or you're out, and to get away from that language, that everybody that needs that support can get it, but it can be delivered in a different way. So the Family Wellbeing Fund that you refer to sounds to be quite exciting, and how we can be quite innovative with that fund. But it's really to get an early report, rather than just a report or something going to Children, Family and Support Group for them to approve, but for us to look at it and see, how are we tackling this? Because if the numbers keep increasing, then we're going to have serious problems, as is highlighted in 3.10. And it's to meet that requirement of the people there and the demand that's coming on the service. And it's really for us to get an early report to say, how are we managing this? Because there's only a fine line between what is a family support to it then becoming a statutory, and you're maybe before the beak. So it's really to get a grasp on that, and that we are looking at this through the third and independent sector, and by any other means, resilience groups or whatever, that we have got that handle on it for the committee. So really it's in the recommendation we get an early report.
Lillian, can you come in on that? Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie, and really good points to note. It's just in terms of governance, just to give committee some information. The Children's Services Planning Group is answerable through the Children's Services Plan that goes to full council. However, what I'm happy to do is also give an update to Social Work Committee on the specifics around the funding and how the decisions are made around that. But the actual governance goes to full council. Just a point of clarity. Thank you, Councillor Scobie. Just assurance.
Okay, that's fine. Just before I let you in, Pauline, Stephen, I've picked up there with a lot of new members in the committee, even very few returning members. I would suggest with more newbies in Social Work Committee. Is there any pieces of information, you know, briefings, whatever else you could share with us so that we can understand it, get up and running quickly? Yeah, is that possible?
I can give you briefings. What I would be really, really keen to do is, and this is about time and availability, is a seminar when it's much more interactive. I am really passionate about, you know, supporting the most vulnerable children, and I think you get much more of a feel in a seminar format, but I can certainly give you a briefing on the main kind of national policy initiatives and how that links in locally and what we're doing. But I would be really keen, this is a plea this time, to have a seminar at some point after recess, just to give people a flavour of what's happening. And if I may, Chair, if I could respond to a specific point from Councillor Scobie, if that's okay. Yeah. And it's in relation to the third sector, Councillor Scobie. As part of the Children's Planning Group, we've got a family support priority within that, and that group are currently undertaking a service analysis across all of the sectors around what type of family support's available across the region, to help us look at where the gaps are and how we plan for the future in terms of where the gaps would be locally, and how we might fill those using all of the different sectors that are across the region. So I hope that gives some assurance. And if I may, on Councillor Stevenson's point about the training, we absolutely are going to continue the training for teaching and other staff. Obviously, the pandemic's had a massive impact in terms of people's priorities and not getting in a room, but that's on our agenda, and we'll be getting that up and running again into next year. When I say next year, I'm speaking school years here. Even though I'm a social worker, I tend to look at school years as a football season, so school years is more appropriate in this environment.
Okay, we'll come back, because Lillian wants to speak to us at the end about some of the stuff you've just covered. So, Pauline, do you want, and then, or is it Chrissy?
Yeah,
Pauline,
thanks very much, Chair. And Stephen, this report is really, really helpful and most interesting. Thank you. I am going to come back in. You've actually almost answered the questions, but on 3.15 with regards to the Children's Services Planning Group and the Family Wellbeing Fund, I'm looking forward to receiving the report that we're going to receive later in the year. And I think there are gaps, definitely. I'm sure Lillian and yourself would agree to this, For example, with active communities at the moment, if you go onto the website on the Dumfries and Galloway page, unfortunately, there are only some regions covered. Perhaps it needs updating, but, you know, the Stewartry is very much left out of keeping mums moving and walking. And we all know children who need support need happy and helpful parents or carers. So I'm just wanted to make sure, Stephen, when you bring that report back to the committee, that you will cover all the groups that the third sector will support. For example, boxercise groups, walking groups and outdoors groups, because I think we're missing a wee gap there. But the work you're doing is brilliant, and I look forward to receiving the report in the future. Thank you.
Okay, Pauline, I don't think you need an answer to that. I think Stephen's nodding, so that's fine. I don't see anybody else coming in now. No. In that case, then we'll go on to the recommendations. Of course, we just asked to note the progress and achievements of the Family Support Service over the last 3 months it's got here. And just to let you know that there's a press release has been done to report on the good work so that the public are aware of it. Because a lot of this goes unseen by the public, but it's very important that we make them aware just exactly what's happening without breaching the integrity of the families, for example. So that's already been done. So that's item 6 finished. Item 7 is the Public Protection Committee minutes for noting. Just a straightforward noting job. We're happy with them. We get them on a regular basis whenever they are. Okay, move on then. I've got one item of either business. Lillian would like to speak to us, to kind of encapsulate some of what Stephen said earlier, but some extra bits, about some offers to assimilate herself with the department.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just an offer to members. We have done this previously, and I would just like to open it up to new members and members returning. We would always offer the opportunity to spend some time with the staff. You know, to go out with the teams. In the past, for example, folks have spent some time with the early intervention team. They've had some visits to our children's house at Hardthorne Road. Members have spent some time on the unpaid work team under the justice services and so on and so forth. So more than happy if any member has a specific ask, then we would facilitate you spending some time with social work services to maybe perhaps give you a better understanding of some of the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis. We are also planning a range of briefing notes which we will make sure we circulate to everyone on the committee and the wider elected members. But as Stephen's already articulated, we are looking after recess to offer members some items of seminar. I would be keen if any member wanted to email me about a specific area that you would wish us to do a seminar on. You will be aware that we are currently awaiting the outcome of the review of the National Care Service, and I believe I'll probably have to have a number of seminars and conversations with you moving forward on that item. As Stephen's already indicated, the promise, which is also a significant item for social work services at this moment in time, and there is a significant amount of national change around adult services. And although adult services are delegated to the Health and Social Care Partnership, these are local authority employees, and I hold the professional oversight and responsibility for the management of those services. So there is a lot to there. I will be making those offers to you, but in terms of us making sure that we are giving you the education, the information, the opportunity, it is really important for the team. So that's Stephen as the Senior Manager for Children Services, Rebecca Aldridge as the Senior Operational Manager for Social Work, and obviously myself. If you'd wish to email us or just contact us, the door is always open for anything that you specifically feel you would like us to either have a seminar, a briefing or a conversation. Happy to meet any member at any point, and I would just like to make that offer to committee and the wider elected members at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so everybody, there's an open invitation. Don't all rush. And obviously, you'll need to spell it because operational activities might overtake us at
Of
times.
course.
Absolutely. So I think that's it. We've got the offer from the Chief Social Work Officer. Take it up. It's in your interest, it's in everybody's interest. I've no other business, so thank you very much, and thank you very much for your professionalism today, and thank you, Lillian and Stephen, and those who will be presenting papers to us today. So thank you, and no doubt we'll see you in, what, 2 months' time, is it?
Indeed.
Yeah, 2 months' time. Okay, thank you.